The first Bond film I ever saw was Goldfinger, and I saw that in about 1986 when I was about 5. And my dad showed it to me. He must have just videoed it off of TV, and I just fell in love with the Bond films as soon as I saw them. And the very first film I ever saw in the cinema, the first trip I ever had as a kid, inside a movie theatre, was to see The Living Daylights the following year, 1987. And I was way too young to see it. I knew nothing about the Mujahideen or, what was going on in Afghanistan. And that all must have gone completely over my head. But I just, from that opening shot of Bond, like racing down the Rock of Gibraltar on top of the Land Rover, I loved the Aha song and the Aston Martin with the skis that came out the side. I just will never forget that first trip to the cinema. And I think there's only been one movie I've seen in that time since that has given me that same thrill, and that was Jurassic Park. A lot of people say that every generation has a Spielberg movie that's theirs, and I think for any kid that was 12 in 1993, it was Jurassic Park.
That's interesting, because it's interesting you say it was the first film you saw at a cinema, Living Daylights, because I have a similar thing with Star Wars, because I saw the Phantom Menace, which, looking back, not a great first film. But when you're, I must have been, it came out in 99, didn't it? So I don't know, 5, 6, maybe not even that, maybe. And so that that sort of hooked me on Star Wars. So it is something about seeing your first film on the big screen, and that really sort of captures you and gets you into something. So you saw the Living Daylights at the cinema.
Yeah, and I remember I was completely hooked on Bond by then, and I must have known that Bond films came out every other year, because I think at that point I was old enough to work out. I remember having this list of Bond films that I think it was in like Flicks magazine, which was like this free newspaper that you got inside cinemas. And I had this at 6 years old, and I just remember just digesting and consuming all the information in there. And it listed every Bond film and the year they came out. And I was looking at it thinking, Spy Who Loved Me, 77, Moonraker, 79, and so on. And you get Living Daylights, 87. I think there's got to be a Bond film in 1989, which of course there was. And I remember just waiting that 2 years until I was 8, until that film came out, and then being absolutely disappointed when it had a 15 certificate and I wasn't going to be able to see it. And in those days, you had to wait a whole year before films came out on sell-through and VHS rental. And I just then remember having to wait till 1990 to see it. And then you'd race down to the video shop on a Saturday afternoon, and they'd have like 4 copies of License to Kill, and you just hoping that you were going to get there and get a copy of it in time. And I remember the first couple of weeks it was gone, and you couldn't get it. But I remember absolutely devouring License to Kill. And then we had this massive 6-year gap. So most of my childhood growing up, sort of like into my early teens, there wasn't a Bond movie. And, I talk to a lot of Bond fans who are older than me. And, they talk about growing up on those Roger Moore Bond films in the 70s and, having one after another every other year. I had none of that. And it wasn't until GoldenEye came out in 1995, that was when I think I really became the Bond fan that I sort of am today. And it's interesting, you speak to a lot of people that were that age when GoldenEye came out. So anybody that's sort of like in their late 30s now, there's this sort of like sub-culture division, like the GoldenEye generation. We all grew up on that movie. And you talk about, our dads loving those movies in the 60s. Or you've got another group that, just remember The Spy Who Loved Me. That's their film that they sort of like put up on the pedestal. I think for anybody that's my age, I think it's GoldenEye, because it was the first Bond film of our generation that we sort of owned and was sort of our film. And I won't have anybody diss Pierce Brosnan. It seems to be a really fashionable thing right now in a Daniel Craig era to say, oh, weren't those Pierce Brosnan films absolutely awful? And I absolutely disagree. I think GoldenEye is a classic. And there's so many elements in that movie that are incredible. I think they tried to do a lot of things with the 3 subsequent films, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. And I just don't think that the films were really to make that leap, which they did with Casino Royale. But I think GoldenEye is an awesome movie, and I think it speaks volumes for a specific generation. I just absolutely love it.